two heroes tasked with protecting extraordinary worlds filled with literal gods and monsters while using nothing more than their comically overwhelming physical strength. And they even sort of look similar too. So it only really makes sense why you, your grandma, and everyone at her freaking bingo game too would suggest a fight like this. But while Mashle Burnedead is undoubtedly strong to an almost unlimited degree, by even uttering the name Saitama, you invoke a character with strength so unparalleled that he can seemingly defeat anyone in just one punch. So, as much as I've grown to love this goofy little guy after the past few videos, could we really expect him to take on someone like that?
Who, me? I'm just a guy who's a hero for fun. I never lose.
Then bring it on, scumbag.
Now, with the pretty insane implications posed by the title and intro, I know we've got a lot of ground to cover if I want to avoid being crucified by the comments section for even suggesting that a fight involving Mr. One-Shot Your Favorite Verse himself could be anything short of a complete stomp. And to be honest, I'm sure most of you who suggested this probably feel that way too, expecting Saitama to just dog walk lil bro before hitting him with the serious belt. So to explain my thoughts behind all this, let's just cut the crap and address the million-dollar question that precedes any Saitama matchup. Could Mash even really take one punch from the caped Baldy? My answer is yes. But to understand why, we've got to go all the way back to the only day where muscles alone couldn't save our magicless wizard. Chapter 148, Mashle Burnedead and the Door's Demand, where we find the titular hero surrounded by an all-encompassing void, left unsure of the world around him until a veiled figure sitting atop a mighty gate confirms that Mash is indeed dead. His once seemingly limitless ability to overcome any obstacle placed in his way had finally come up short during his fight against the now fully manifested god of time, Innocent Zero, where Mash had his heart ripped from his body and succumbed to his injuries. But of course, even the clutches of death couldn't contain the muscles that flex for peace, causing Mash to break down the gates of heaven, a structure stated to transcend all of reality, just to confront God himself, demanding that he be returned to life. Why I bring all this up though is because after touching the hand of God, similar to someone else our One Punch Man fans might recall, Mash attained strength far beyond what was conceivable to that point. What was once an enemy in Innocent Zero, who Mash couldn't even dream of handling, had now become someone who he could undoubtedly defeat. He flicks him across the battlefield, calls him names, and straight up pulls out the full-blown Gutskotsky kick on him, all while the universe itself is slowing down to less than 1% of its regular speed, causing Innocent Zero to quickly realize that he was being thoroughly pummeled by raw power. But in his mind, there were really no worries, since a god of time like himself could practically save and reset the timeline like a video game character. So he'd just try again, then again, and again, until it clearly dawned on him that he had done goofed. Because what he once saw as a minor inconvenience had now become an impassable roadblock, so ridiculously unbeatable that even with infinite do-overs and the most potent magic in the series, Mash would always be standing in his way. So what does any sane villain do in this situation? If you answered that it's time to rage quit life and take the entire planet out with you, then you're finally starting to get where this time god save scumming gamer is coming from, because he does exactly that. Full-blown giant doom sphere of destruction, try and stop me now monologue and all. With everyone from the wizards to the random civilians and even the god dude himself saying that Earth is cooked. making Innocent Zero's power level pretty analogous with what we saw from the likes of a Lord Boros in the One Punch Man manga. Fortunately though, MASH took a page from the Patrick Star playbook, and while the rest of the cast used their magic to nerf the planet-destroying blast, he took the entire continent they were standing on and pushed it somewhere else, causing Innocent Zero to say screw it, give up on his lifelong plan, and bring everyone he offed back to life. Oh, and did I mention that MASH did all of this while still being nerfed from missing his heart, as well as suppressed by his limiter bracelets, which quite literally force him to only use a tiny fraction of his maximum power to avoid destroying, well, everything as collateral. And if you're wondering why I'm telling you about them instead of just showing you their effectiveness, this post-God Amp version of MASH only participates in this one fight before the series' conclusion. And although it's far and away his best performance in the entire manga, it's actually such a good performance that he doesn't even bother to remove those limiting bracelets or activate his special peak fighting mode, preventing us from ever seeing his full potential play out on screen. Basically, imagine if Goku got so strong from training that he managed to beat Jiren, Frieza, or Beerus without even using Super Saiyan. Of course, it wouldn't mean he couldn't go Super Saiyan anymore, but rather that he was just so far above his competition, he decided not to. This is basically the situation MASH was in. However, using what we have seen for reference, a much weaker MASH went from struggling to play Wii Sports against Mach 7 projectiles to landing his punch squared attack, which is stated to contain 65,536 punches, all in an instant before his Mach 7 opponent could even perceive it. That's a gap from Mach 7 to upwards of Mach 458,752. And it's crazily not even his most impressive speed feat, with earlier parts in that fight showing him physically appear in thousands of places simultaneously to beat the God of Water using a bucket and some after images, clocking in at something more like Mach 30 million if you're being generous, which is 35 times faster than the speed of light. And now consider that this quote-unquote mode has no drawbacks, weaknesses, or restrictions, as it's simply just MASH unleashing his maximum power, on top of the fact that post-God Amp MASH, who folded a Planet Buster across what could have been infinite timelines, was already more than 100 times faster and stronger than that pre-Amp weightless MASH, despite still having his weights on. Hopefully you can sort of start to see how that an end-of-series MASH, roided up on his multipliers, could start to get pretty unreasonably strong, even without ever mentioning his other form, Weakness Mode, which is unironically even stronger than just a plain weightless MASH due to its pseudo-Ultra Instinct-esque ability, where his muscles relax, causing him to be more difficult to hit than paper in the wind, without compromising power. This state of perfect lethargy is described as the ultimate muscular mode, and directly multiplies MASH's weightless power level for a sort of doubled power-up type deal. But saying my piece on all that, I hope my explanation becomes clear. MASH definitively, at his most restricted and fatigued, defeated this Boros-esque character with planet-busting attacks and hyper-regen in the form of Innocent Zero, and Boros, in both the OPM manga and anime, can eat one of Saitama's normal punches while in his suppressed armor form, and even outright deals damage to him, if only slightly, with his attacks. This lines up pretty consistently with Saitama casually holding down S-class heroes like Tatsumaki, who could slice continents off the earth, as well as the now iconic cover page depicting Saitama bench pressing 2 black holes, which would require enough force to destroy every continent on Earth just to lift their weight once. So, while I'm obviously not trying to say that Boros, Tatsumaki, or this random cover page are any sort of comparison to Saitama's uppermost limits, the whole concept of a serious punch would disprove that on its face, But when you remember that Mash himself couldn't even be bothered to bring out his own maximum power against this similar planet-threatening force, it's at least not entirely unreasonable for both Mash and Saitama to be unironically kind of competitive in their casual stats, making a hypothetical Mash, roided up on all of his multipliers, potentially too strong for the iconic punch. But of course, the real contention comes down to that ever-fabled serious punch and Saitama's real maximum output, because in all reality, nobody in the current main continuity has ever gotten up from one of those, and it's usually sort of the benchmark for any Saitama versus somebody discussion. Fortunately though, we're actually given quite a few ways to calc out the upper limits of what such a punch might be capable of. From booping Boros and his planet-destroying attack with just the winds off his fist, to the general scale of some of his other serious attacks, Serious Punch's raw output should be confidently above those planetary levels, with the higher ends of what it can do being best shown during the earliest portion of the Cosmic Garo fight, where Garo himself, who had similarly touched the hand of God, learned all the secrets the universe had to offer in terms of both martial arts and natural phenomena, up to and including learning to fire off his own mini gamma ray bursts, which are the strongest explosions to naturally occur in our universe. Yet, despite all that knowledge and power, the only way he could imagine beating Saitama was by copying his Serious Punch. Now keep in mind, Garo's gamma ray bursts are often calced out to be capable of destroying large planets like Jupiter, due to just how large the black holes he forms are, with Saitama himself even outright implying that if one of those bursts even grazed the ground, Earth would fall apart like a microwaved Swiss cheese. Of course though, when Saitama does finally go on to have his own, now infamous Punch Squared scene, we get to see the real cap of a Serious Punch's destructive capability, with the ensuing force of the colliding hits, even once teleported out into the upper atmosphere hundreds of miles away from the planet, still setting off effects so catastrophic that Earth would have been shattered as cosmic collateral if the force hadn't been redirected by blast. With even said redirected force of the punch's shockwave sending the pair flying some odd 800 million miles away in a few seconds to land on one of Saturn's moons, which is actually pretty in line with those large planet to potentially small star estimates from before. And some would even argue that this hole in space on the panel here would have to equate to dozens of solar systems, if not galaxies, being vaporized in their clash. Although, considering that nothing in our own solar system was destroyed, including the moon they literally collided with, as well as the fact that blast never implies any wider universal danger, I personally chalk this up to the light from those solar systems being dispersed or redirected away in this collision, especially considering that Murata, the artist for One Punch Man, is actually pretty knowledgeable on space stuff, so he likely wouldn't draw the feat this way if he intended to make Saitama's later showings in the fight at the much lower scale we see, as opposed to this hypothetical galaxy-destroying Punch Squared, for kind of obvious narrative reasons that I'll get into in a bit. So sure, Mash could pretty much definitely no-sell a normal punch, and maybe even keep up with a casual Saitama if the duo were just goofing off. But is there really any way to argue that Mash can even hurt Saitama, let alone survive a full-blown serious punch? Well, again, Garo did already show us that just a copied normal punch could seriously damage and draw blood from the baldy. So if Mash is already well above that life-wiping club, where the normal punch sort of capped out against, then go figure, he too could probably damage Saitama, however minorly. As for the serious punch though, if you believe in the lower metas presented for Saitama here, then all it would really take to go from planet level to that larger planet level would be granting Mash's two forms at least a 100 times multiplier apiece, since they can seemingly stack on top of one another. And considering we already know that Mashel's version of the Bankai, 2nd magic, is a 10 times increase, and that 3rd's magic, which is an even stronger version, grants a larger increase, trying to say that Mash's own comparable maximum modes don't have a similar multiplier after he's already beaten multiple thirds magic users in the past would just be pretty silly, making it almost impossible to argue less than that 100 times increase necessary, even at the lowest interpretation for either mode. Then, if you fold in Mash's insane understanding of biomechanics, letting him regen by crushing his muscles together, instinctually react to attacks like a Diet Goku, kick his legs together fast enough to fly, and all sorts of other wacky stuff, I'd go as far as to say that he might not just survive current Saitama, but may genuinely be able to push him to a point that no one else in his own story ever could. To pain, to exhilaration, and to excitement. Mash's outright comical strength has the potential to push Saitama to what he's been searching for all this time. The thrill of a real fight. Except, we already know what happens when Saitama reaches that fight he's always been searching for. And although he may have gotten what he finally wanted, Saitama wasn't in the least bit excited, even with the prospect of going against someone who could stand against his full power. Because when these exact events played out against the monster with God's power, Cosmic Fear Garo, who had successfully copied every single aspect of Saitama's limitless power, he was still no match. As even now, Saitama was continuing to grow. His strength began to explode due to an upsurge in emotion like none that he had ever experienced before. And despite Garo at one point being Saitama's definitive equal, in the span of just one chapter, there was no longer anybody left who could truly measure what level Saitama's strength had reached. His sneeze, the literal force of his sneeze, was capable of blowing away Jupiter in the vacuum of space. And Garo, like all of us, quickly realized he wanted no part of that. And then the rest is history. Garo got stomped, Saitama became apathetic again, and the duo agreed this was a pretty crappy timeline to be stuck in. So Garo shared the greatest knowledge the universe had to offer, and Saitama learned it on sight in just a matter of seconds, then used this technique to rewind the clock, beat Garo in one time-warping punch, and merge back with his main timeline self to forget all of it. But of course, we didn't, hopefully cementing where I stand on this topic. While you could debate all day and night about the absurd, almost gag comic levels that a theoretical Prime Mash could reach, and even make a decent case for the guy being able to walk off the full power of Saitama's serious punch, it's never been a problem for the One Punch Man to just throw another. And when he does, he's gonna get stronger. Add in the fact that Saitama can adapt to any power level, can kick away intangible things just like Mash's door feet, and has the capacity to learn anything under the heavens, it should be pretty clear that having no limits is simply a power that you just can't beat the stuffing out of. But I still think Saitama being pushed to his limits in an all-out fight against someone who just wants to go home and make the world a better place, one pastry at a time, might just be the exact kind of thrill our hero for fun was always looking for in the end.
Nice fight, man. Should be proud of yourself.
And that's all for today. Thanks, everyone.